So with that, I'd like to invite up our first speaker. Terry Clower is the Deputy Director of the Center for Regional Analysis at the School of Policy, Government, and International Affairs at George Mason University. And in his current position and in his prior position at another institution, he's had extensive experience in dealing with economic development and related issues, both with local governments and in the private sector. And he's going to talk about some studies that they have done in the Center for Regional Analysis on the topics that we're talking about tonight. Dr. Clower?
Thank you, John. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm a relatively newcomer to town, arrived last summer from North Texas, when, of course, I came here for the weather and the laid-back atmosphere to live here. I will tell you that you people pay too darn much for your housing. Let's just get that out of the way, but that is what it is, and we're going through. What I'm going to do is share a few slides that came from a white paper that one of my colleagues, David Vercel, wrote a couple of 3 months ago. It is available on the Center for Regional Analysis website at GMU. Just do that search term, you can find it, with some specifics where we're comparing some factors about real estate values and comparisons across different jurisdictions in the area. But I'm also going to impose on John just a little bit in setting a little bit of a framework also in just quick discussion about what's going on in this region. The DC region is facing some challenges that you're not used to seeing. I will start it out with this. The unemployment rate is low, and that looks good. But did you know that among the major metropolitan areas of this country last year, DC trailed everybody in job creation? I'm talking about the region. Detroit performed better than we did. That's how I always get people's attention about how you're doing, right? For a while there, it looked like Philadelphia was going to be worse, but they fell off and actually did a little better. We have some real challenges here. Federal employment is continuing to attract. They're not, or sorry, decline. They are not firing people, but they're not replacing. It's attrition. We have about 5,000 fewer federal workers in this market now than we did a year ago. We have seen a period of time from 2010 through 2013 of 3 straight years of declining federal procurement spending. Nobody can ever remember that happening. Now, 2014 actually ticked up just a touch, but it was just a touch. Obviously, we have this evil word sequester that's, that's starting to loom its head again, and we're not sure what's going to come out of that. We have some real challenges in this economy. The jobs that we are creating, certainly we are creating some good jobs, but we are creating a whole lot of jobs that just doesn't pay as well as they did before the recession. What we're creating is a lot of jobs in the hospitality sector, in retail, and those are jobs, and people that have them appreciate those jobs, but they don't have the value. They're not paying as high wages. In fact, some data that just came out for 3 years in a row now, average wages per job in this region have declined. Year-over-year declines. Now, this starts to have implications for many things that you're going to talk about tonight in terms of our ability to spend money that supports retail, our ability to how much we pay for housing. All of these factors start coming into play, and I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here as we start the evening, but I want you to have a sense that there are some challenges that we're facing. This is not something that we can say, oh, well, the recession's over and the national economy looks really good and we're just chugging along. That just isn't the case right now, and we're working with business leaders across the region to talk about regional efforts that we can do about how do we reshape this economy a little bit. Do we want to continue to be an economy that 40% of our economy depends on what they decide to do on Capitol Hill? And that's a pretty that's a lot of reliance on people that appear to not be able to make decisions on a regular basis, right? President Obama just did his 3rd veto in office, and it hasn't been because he hadn't wanted to. He just hadn't had much opportunity to have anything presented to him to veto. So in any case, so moving along, we'll go through a couple of slides here just to give you some, again, it's perspective similar to what John showed previously, where the real estate property taxes as a percent of general fund revenues is pretty high across the board. For those of you that might have a hard time seeing it in the back, Arlington is the third column from the left at roughly, give or take, about 57% or so. All of the jurisdictions in Northern Virginia are at least at 54%. DC and Maryland are a little bit lower, and that is because of their ability to collect income taxes. That's just where that differential comes through there. Next slide, please. If we look at the percentage change, oh, go back one. There we go. Thank you very much. The percentage change in real property, well, from the period of time of 2009 to 2014, you guys have actually done pretty well. You've seen increases of about 15%, and that has certainly been better than everybody in the region, with the exception of Loudoun County. Loudoun County has had a lot of success with their, of course, from an economic development standpoint, their data centers, and of course, they've gotten a lot of surge of development that's related to people coming out and anticipatory effects of the Silver Line and that pushing on out toward Dulles. Maryland, well, yeah, Maryland just hasn't been doing as well, but it's still, it's one that you have seen some real benefits in these changes, but these changes are very uneven across the type. If we can look at the next slide, please. This is a bit of a complicated slide. There's a lot of information on it. Arlington is the third set of columns on the top, and what you're seeing are 3 consecutive years where the blue is would be 2005, and then 2009 and 2014. So some year increments there. And what you're seeing is that the share of non-residential properties as a share of the total has been increasing in Arlington County, and that's a good thing. If you'll note that John said before, the economic model is based on that kind of 50-50 split. You've increased since 2009 to fit that. We didn't go back, or I'm sorry, 2005. That was, if you will, think about a kind of an inflection point where we started seeing things happening in the economy. So right now, you are just, you're just about there where you like to be. To give you some context, where I come from, normally you would think that you're doing pretty well as a suburban community if you have about 30% of your tax base in non-residential. But of course our taxes are not as high because our property values are not as high. I mean, our tax rates, get kind of similar, but still, you have a good balance, and I think much of your conversation about this issue is going to be, is this sustainable? How can we keep this balance? What are we going to have to do to keep this? Next slide, please. So if we look at, here in a second, there we go, the percentage change in non-residential assessed valuations by property type. And again, there's 2 kind of basic sides of this slide. Arlington is in the yellow, so it should scream out at you pretty well. And you have multifamily and then other non-residential. Multifamily as rental properties count as commercial in most analyses. So when we say residential, we're talking about single-family homes, townhomes, and condominiums, but that are ownership units. Once it is a commercial enterprise, it is considered commercial value. So what you have seen, of course, is pretty good valuation change in that multifamily sector, and indeed, you've even had in other non-residential during this time period some increases. If you look at a slightly different time period, you've got about 40% gains in non-residential assessments and about 11% gain in your residential assessments. So again, you've seen good increases in that. Some of that has been office, some of it has been commercial enterprises, and of course some of it has been the addition of new apartments. Next slide, please. Well, that actually is the last slide on this. Let me just bring up a couple of other things that I think, though, if we take it into more recent. So while all of that is actually saying pretty good news, the piece that you have probably read about in the papers is increasing struggles in the office segment of commercial markets. And in those segments right now, you have vacancy rates that are exceeding 20%. And that's going to obviously start impacting values. Now, those valuation changes don't happen immediately. It takes a while for these to cycle through the economy. If we look at what's been going on most recently, according to some data that's just been released, if we look at 2015 versus 2014, total valuations up about 3.4%, residential about 4.9%, existing apartments up 4.7%, about 3.2% in new apartments. Office, on the other hand, is down 4.5% versus last year. And then we start thinking about those other stresses that I was talking about going on in the economy. You've got some pending vacancies in the next couple of years. If you think about NSF moving to Alexandria out of the Boston corridor and some other pieces like that. We also have this thing about, do we expect federal government to continue to basically, do we expect a spending spree? Do we expect massive recovery among the contractors and all those? And I don't think we have much evidence of that right at the moment. The other thing that I'm going to kind of tee up for the economic development guys to talk about in a little bit is some of the challenges for this region in terms of competitiveness. Looking at a period of time from 2000 to about 2013, which for this data source about all you get, the number of net new jobs from businesses coming in. So take the businesses that have decided to move to the DC area and subtract the ones that have decided to leave the DC area, and it's basically a net wash. This is a very tough market to be competitive for business attraction. Your economic development folks have a really hard time. What we have seen in this market here, though, and particularly in Arlington County, I think is really interesting in that during that period of time you had job growth of roughly about 12.5%. Depends on how you can count certain types of entrepreneurship jobs. You've done really well in terms of actually expanding your existing businesses, and that's from an economic development standpoint always your best thing. You know, get the people that are already doing business here, give them the support and the encouragement and the opportunities they need to expand. It's not like having to pay a big incentive for some company to move from California or something like that. And indeed, you don't have my former governor in Texas trying to come up and steal your businesses kind of thing. The other that you've done very well at is supporting startups. You know, you've had significant job growth that represents entrepreneurship. Where you have been losing has been that relocation thing. If you look at the companies that have moved into town, into Arlington County versus move out, you're down something like about almost 8%. And now you think about where are they going? Well, the evidence is that they're actually staying in the region, and what you're having going on here is a bit of a shuffling of the chairs on the deck. Companies, you know, if you have you build a new building out in Tysons, you build a new building out in Reston, you do something, you build a new building further out into Loudoun County, and yes, people come into it, but it's businesses that are consolidating from several different places around town, or in some cases coming from Arlington County. And that's part of the challenge that I think is being faced by the economic development side. So in a sense, where you are doing well in certain parts of your economy, being able to protect, and what we call in economic development, the business retention side, is a real challenge about what do you have in your toolbox to try to keep your businesses here. Now, the reason for doing so, getting back to our point tonight, is that being able to keep that diverse base of businesses, commercial office enterprises, is what's going to keep that balance that you have in your tax base close to that 50%, because the further you drift away from that, I promise you that your results are going to be higher and higher property tax rates. And with that, I'll pass it along.